Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. We're delighted to have all of you this evening. There will be one wait, I should back up, sorry. The agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room for you to follow along, and there will be one opportunity to address the board tonight before we enter into a work session. There is a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board, and a timer will be shown on the screen. And with that, Ms. Marshall, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bell?
Here.
Mrs. Altman?
Here.
Dr. Nestbraker?
Here.
Mrs. Meyer?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here. Will you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, up first this evening, we have the superintendent's report.
President Davidson, Vice President.
President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, members of the board, Mrs. Marshall, at your request, I'd like to take a few minutes to give a brief overview of the district's local report card and our goals for the year. The district did score overall 4 stars on the state report card, and we have lots of things to be proud of. More than 47% of our graduates take an advanced placement course, which is outstanding. But when you add that figure with International Baccalaureate and College Credit Plus classes, it shows that a majority of our students will have college-level experience when they graduate, evidenced on their transcripts. All of our high schools met or exceeded the state's graduation rate expectations. Our graduation rate of 92.5% for the class of 2022 exceeds our pre-COVID graduation rates. It's the first time since before 2018 that Westerville schools exceeded 92% as a district. Our 5-year graduation rate for the class of 2021 is 94%. Their 4-year rate last year was 91.3%, which shows our commitment to work with our students to earn their diploma even after their cohort has graduated. For all grades combined, our results on the state test indicate that as a district, our students exceeded student growth expectations set by the state. Most high school assessments exceeded expected 1 year's growth. English Language Arts 2, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Biology. All student subgroup demographics met their performance index targets in English Language Arts and Math, resulting in 5 stars in the gap closure component. In the area of expected 1 year's growth by subgroup, in English Language Arts, the groups that had the highest growth were English learners, economically disadvantaged, and Black non-Hispanic students. For Math, the greatest growth happened with our economically disadvantaged, English learners, Asian Hispanic, and Black students. What that tells me is that we are having great learning success with our most at-risk student populations. Of our schools, 21 of the reported 22 schools met or exceeded the state's expectation for performance. Minerva Park will be represented on next year's report card. 18 of our schools met or exceeded the state's expectation for progress growth. 21 met or exceeded the state's expectation for gap closure. And 13 of our 15 elementary schools met or exceeded the state's expectation for early literacy. However, we do have areas that we can grow. 1 in 5 of our students are considered either chronically or habitually truant, missing 10% or more of their instructional time. Of our 2022 graduates, only students categorized as white and Asian have graduation rates of 90% or better. All other groups fall somewhere in the 90s. And as a new superintendent coming in, I'm curious if we have policies in place that are hamstringing us. For example, if we don't allow students who are suspended to earn credit while they're out, are we biting off our nose to spite our face? Math passage rates at the middle school represent the lowest percentages in the district, with 6th grade passage rate of 60.6%, 7th grade at just over 55%, and 8th grade at 42.9%. Although for grades 6 and 7, math students exceeded the state's expectation for growth. And a dip in performance for 4th grade English Language Arts. A close eye will be kept on this group. School was shut down in their kindergarten year, and for most of their first grade year, they were in cohorts, so their foundation learning experience was much more disrupted than any other class. So overall, I think our report card shows really promising things about the Westerville schools, and we know that we have areas to grow, and we'll continue to do that. Regarding district goals, our district goal as a whole, the combined goal, is for us to have an overall report card grade of meets or exceeds standards on the ODE local report card. This is the star rating system that was implemented this year for the first time. Our building and department goals will be in a share file for the board to view if desired. So we have work to do. It's good work to do, and we have a good team to do it. So I'll take any questions if you have them, and I'll do my best to answer them. It's day 23 of my tenure.
Anyone have a hard question to ask him? Nope. Hearing none.
Thank
Thank you
you
so much. We appreciate it. Okay. You did have one? Oh, sorry. Okay, moving on. 4.1, approval of the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting held on Monday, October 9th, 2023. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Moving on to public comments, we do have one person signed up to speak. I would like to welcome Melissa Smiley to the podium.
I am here to present a case for. Is that better?
Does it work? Okay.
The light is on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. I'm here to present a case for potential exemption to the residential district boundaries. My husband and I have a shared parenting agreement for our son, Morgan, that is currently a sophomore at Westerville Central. His dad is the individual that secures the boundary or allows him to attend Westerville schools. He is currently building a home in technically in Big Walnut School District, and there are houses adjacent to his address that are in Westerville City Schools. We have paid Westerville taxes probably over 18 years. My parents still live in Westerville when we moved here in 1987, so I am requesting the board to review our case in more detail and allow him to continue his high school career at Westerville Central and not have to move and disrupt that education plan that he is currently at Westerville Central.
So we don't answer questions from up here. We usually have more questions for our staff. So
Okay.
I would like to thank you for your comments, and someone will get back to you.
How, I guess, do I provide what I've prepared in more detail to the board?
So Mr. Dorn in the back would be the person you could do that to.
And then he will instruct me on how to get in contact with someone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I think we have your contact information,
Okay.
so definitely we will be in contact. And we appreciate your comments. Okay, moving on to financials. 6.1, approve the financial report and investments for September 2023. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
And Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, President Davidson, members of the board. So this month, we're going over the September 30th month-end financials. For the general fund, we ended with year-to-date receipts of $80.5 million. And for the general fund, year-to-date expenditures of $47.7 million. And I will mention that September is only the third month of the fiscal year that we're in. We ended with an unencumbered fund balance for September in the general fund of $197.2 million. And for all funds, we have year-to-date receipts of $104.6 million, year-to-date expenditures of $82.1 million, and we ended with an unencumbered fund balance for all funds at $232.7 million. And that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Hearing none.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 6.02, resolution to approve the purchases in accordance with ORC 5705.41 and Board Policy 6320. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you again. So these are what we call then and now purchase orders. So this is where we have a purchase order that's dated after an invoice date. We have 3 on the agenda tonight, and in the case where they exceed $3,000, it does require that the board approve those purchases prior to us being able to make a payment. So we have 3 on the agenda. Riddle All-American Sports, this was for Westerville North Athletic Department. The order was placed in order to see a substantial savings on helmets that they were ordering over the summer, and also to have it in time for the new year. So that was prior to our July 1st start date of the fiscal year. But it has been budgeted for, so we do recommend that that be approved. And then Triad Architects, this was for a pass-through permit that we had that was required, that the PO didn't get opened in time for. Again, has also been budgeted for. And then Granville Exempted Village School District is for a cohort from the Martha Holden Jennings grant that we received, where we're working with 3 other schools on learning practices, and the timing of the grant and getting the vendor set up was the reason why we didn't have a purchase order in place here. But all have been budgeted, and I do recommend the board approve.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 6.3, new audit committee appointment. And do I need a motion?
Motion to appoint Carl Priedman to the audit committee.
So moved.
It's not on there.
Second?
I apologize for that.
That's okay. That's why I kind of,
Who was the second? I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you again. So I'm very excited. I believe he's joining us tonight. Mr. Carl Priedman is a member of the community. He is a retired accountant. He has called me over the years to talk to me about our popular annual financial report. We had one opening on the audit committee, so we're excited for Mr. Priedman to be joining us tonight and for the audit committee in the future with the board's approval. And you do have a copy of his resume.
any questions or comments?
No.
Just hearing none.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Personnel consent agenda. Can I take this as one? Is everyone okay with that? Okay. May I have a motion for 7.1 through 7.11 for the personnel consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Good evening, President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, members of the board, Mrs. Marshall, and Dr. Clark. This evening's personnel consent agenda includes action with regard to resignations, retirements, leaves of absence, contract status changes, one-time pays, and other employment-related decisions. It is important to highlight our retirees on this agenda. Within our classified staff, Philip Sharvett is retiring after 10 years of service within our schools. Timothy Hill after 13 years of service. Sue Kaiser is retiring after 23 years of service, and Janet Koenig after 35 years of service to the district. Within our certified staff, Valerie Thompson will be retiring after 25 years of service, and Jane Webster will be retiring with 37 years of service within our district. This group of employees represents a collective 143 years worth of knowledge and dedication to our students and the families of our district. I would also like to share some changes to our food services department. In an effort to continually improve on the services that we provide to our students, we have restructured the department to include a director and 2 coordinators, reclassifying the previous position titles of manager and assistant manager. The director position promotes a focus on vision and goal-oriented planning. versus the previous responsibilities being much more focused on day-to-day management. The director position right-sizes the food services department to be more aligned to all other district departments and director position responsibilities. The coordinator roles provide for positions focused on the coordination of day-to-day services within the school year, as well as summer food programming offerings within our district, and a commitment to supporting our families more efficiently. It is important to note that restructuring the department with these positions does not impact the general fund of the district, as these positions are funded by the food services account, and our food services program will remain self-funded. On the agenda this evening for your approval are the new Director of Food Services, Brent Kaesler, as well as our new Food Services Coordinator, Tamika Johnson. Brent has joined us this evening, so welcome, Brent. He's back there. Within the contract status changes item on the agenda as well, you will see the reclassification request of our current Assistant Manager, Daniel Parton, to be reclassified to a coordinator. Finally, I wanted to take a moment to update you on our Transportation Department status at this time. Currently, we have 3 open contracted routes. We have had some trouble covering absences recently, which has caused some early releases. The good news is that we have a potential for 14 new contracted and sub-drivers who are going through the hiring process, somewhere between actively training, scheduled for training, or on hold for clearances to come back. Our transportation team has been doing an amazing job making each day work, despite the absences in these 3 posted positions. At this time, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Congratulations, that's a lot of years retiring, so thank you for that, 143 years of service? That's amazing. Thank you, we wish you all the best.
I'm really pleased about the reorganization in food service. It's obviously a vitally important department, and it's one that I know runs as fast as it can all the time to keep up with all the demands, and hopefully this will help with some of that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Old business, 8.1, final reading, policy 2623.02, third grade reading guarantee. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 8.2, final reading, policy 8210, school calendar. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here?
Thanks to everyone who works on this.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work, actually, to put this together, so.
Yep.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. We do not have any new business tonight. Recommended action standing business. 10.1, resolution to adopt online day plan. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
And I would like to welcome Mr. Reeves. Welcome, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, Dr. Clark, and Mrs. Marshall, members of the board. This is a resolution that you have before you that is a result of a change in our budget bill this summer that replaced the online, or added the online day plan and replaced the old Blizzard bags. And there's several requirements in there, and we have been working with our WA colleagues to draft a plan that meets the requirements set by the legislature and ODE, which would be enacted. It would be an option for us to enact if any of our levels, elementary, middle, high, preschool, would exceed the minimum number of hours due to calamity days, and we would have to make up days. And the resolution would allow for those days to be made up in an online teacher-directed format.
I just appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into this, thinking about how to move around the Chromebooks if needed. So thank you.
Well, we had practice in 2020.
Yeah. And I think if if you could clarify, just, I know we've talked about this once before, but it is not the case that we plan never to call a snow day. That's not what this is saying, right? Yeah. You heard it here.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, just that this doesn't mean that there will never be those kind of days. It just puts the plan in place when we get close on the
Correct.
calamity days.
Correct. If we have too many.
Yeah.
And we need to make some days, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are you ready? Okay, sorry. Good. Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 11.1, a resolution to suspend Robert Rules of Order. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Right? Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. And we are going to open up a work session, so we are able to speak freely, and you're welcome to stay and watch and listen. It's okay. So 12.1, special education audit, and I would like to welcome Mr. Reeves again, and he's going to get us started this evening.
Thank you once again, President Davidson. Before you, I'm here with Gertie Glass and Adam Fluge, who together we will update the board on our progress on our special education review and report audit that was done a few years ago. So just in review, really quickly, if you recall, after the 2021 school year, Westerville City Schools contracted with Gibson Consulting Group to take a look at all aspects of our special education department operations. Over the course of the 21-22 school year, Gibson reviewed data, documents, completed staff surveys, did small group interviews and one-on-one interviews, and made observations in over 40 classrooms in 9 different school buildings. In August of that year, Gibson provided us with a very comprehensive 108-page report of their review. The review contains 10 commendations and processes and practices that the special education administrators, teachers, and aides do very well and should continue to do. They also included 19 recommendations for any adjustments, improvements, or changes to our current practices. Gibson first shared the document with former Superintendent Dr. Kellogg and members of our executive leadership team. After reviewing and discussing those pieces and parts of the document, I shared the report with the Board of Education. I also shared it with our special education administrative team, our teaching and learning department, administrative leaders, and our principals. I also convened a special education core team, which President Davidson was a part of, and what we did was this team met periodically to review all of the recommendations, and we discussed what they meant, and we prioritized them into very high priority, medium priority, or low priority, and we also prioritized them in terms of being less complicated to very complicated to implement. Over the course of the work that was done by the Special Education Department, we created what we call a summary document, which chronicled the work that had been done or completed in each of the different recommendations that were given to us. In August of 2023, at the start of this school year, I shared with all of the staff in Westerville City Schools the full Gibson document, as well as the summary document, and those documents can be found not only on my website, but Mr. Fluge's website as well. So we categorized, thank you, Adam. We categorized our review of the recommendations, and we want to first go over the recommendations that we believe have been completed and brought to an end. The numbers that you see up there actually coincide with, if you were to look at the Gibson document, they coincide to the number of the recommendation that was given. So I will do the first one, item number 2, which is actually recommendation number 2, and that was the reorganization of the Department of Teaching and Learning. And really to provide more oversight and accountability for all of our specialized learning programs and all of our teaching and learning department. So as you recall, the superintendent, deputy superintendent, and our Board of Education over several years completed an examination and an analysis of the district's admin team structure to maximize our efficiency, our accountability, our workflow, and to support all facets of the district's operation. Adjustments were made to the admin team and to various positions, and that culminated last April as the board made its final recommendations and changes to align and better structure our teaching and learning team. And so that was a recommendation also from Gibson that we believe has come to completion.
Good evening, President Davidson, Ms. Meyer, members of the board, Dr. Clark, and Ms. Marshall. First off, I would like to thank our team for being here this evening, because I know that it's a lot of work that you guys have been doing, and this work has not, you guys are very much appreciated for all the work that you have done. So if I could please have Ms. Fogel, please raise your hand and say hello. Hi. Ms. Wright-Best, Ms. Whitson, Ms. Yorkin, Mr. Seitz. Again, thank you for all of the work that you guys have done. So item number 3, restructure the special education coordinator's responsibility to increase program accountability and improve instructional supports. The special education department has been actively involved in the professional development of building administrators. 4 summer training sessions have been conducted, with 2 more planned for the school year. Additionally, monthly department meetings continue to be led by special education coordinators with special education staff, related services, and behavior specialists. And these monthly meetings will continue to occur for the remainder of the school year. Okay. Item number 4, review and update job descriptions to ensure that they accurately reflect assigned roles, responsibilities, reporting relationships, and position qualifications. During the spring of the 22-23 school year, the special education administrative team conducted a comprehensive review of all job descriptions related to special education. They also gathered input and feedback from special education teachers, related staff, school psychologists, speech language pathologists, physical therapists, etc. The revised job descriptions were then shared with the Human Resources Department for final approval during the summer of 2023. Item number 10, this is not working. Including the IEP, the total number of minutes a student is to receive. The recommendation was to include the total minutes a student is outside of the general education setting in the individualized education plan services. However, this recommendation was rejected because our process needs to reflect the guidance from the Ohio Department of Education. The district will continue to develop and implement the IEP to be compliant and provide the student with a specific amount of specially designed instruction and time within the resource setting as determined by the IEP team. All administrators have been trained to check IEPs for compliance before and during IEP meetings in which they participate.
Can you say what an IEP is?
Absolutely, individualized education plans. Okay. So an IEP is when a student is go through the ETR evaluation, and then based on that, if the team find the child eligible for IEP services, such as in math, executive deficits, reading, writing, then the team is to write goals to make sure that we are helping the student learn the skills deficits so that they can make progress into the general education settings.
Okay.
And can you just identify the difference between an IEP and a 504 for those that are at home maybe listening and don't know the difference?
Absolutely. When a student is placed in a 504, you are still considered a child with a disability. However, a lot of the times you do not need accommodations to be able to receive the general education information, the education that is put in front of you, and a lot of the times we need to put accommodations in order for you to access the curriculum. Versus an IEP is when we go through an ETL process, there are a lot of dates that you have to follow, and then a school psychologist is involved in the assessment, sometimes it's speech path, physical therapist, and whatever it is that the student needs can be. And then based on that, if you are found eligible for services, then you are given an IEP to make sure that we are also helping you to just learn according to the standard that is set in front of you. Yes. I'm sorry, number 10? Number 11. See, this is why I have him here. So he has to help me. Number 11. The practice of referring Team Teach and IEPs should be replaced with general education with support. During the special education review, Gibson selected random IEPs to review. An IEP that was selected stated Team Teach under Section 7 of the IEP, which is location of services. Team Teach is not a location of services, and that was an error. The district continues to provide trainings, so teachers should use the terminology of general education for the ELA and math courses if the student requires additional adult support. All administrators, again, have been trained to check IEPs for compliance before and during IEP meetings in which they participate.
Can you explain what team teaching is?
Yes, sure. So most of the times when we have a Team Teach class, that's when we have a general education teacher along with a special ed teacher to ensure that all the students in the classroom are receiving the proper accommodations, the proper support in the class so the child can succeed. A lot of the times when we have team teaching class, we also make sure that we help the students also in a 504 to ensure that they are also meeting standards.
I have one clarification question.
Yes,
Could you also explain how IEPs get written, right? So that we had this verbiage in there that maybe didn't belong, but just explain who writes them and how they get reviewed.
Absolutely. So just the IEP. I don't have to go to the detail. So after a school psychologist, along with whatever the related services, found the child eligible for services, the team then has 30 days to write an IEP. The IEP is written by a special ed teacher, which is called intervention specialist, and they read the ETR, they look at all of the deficit that was talked about during the ETR meeting. So with that, then the goals are written based on the deficits that were found in the ETR. So again, a lot of the times it is for math, it is for ELA, it is for executive deficit, it is for written expression. Whatever the IEP on the ETR talked about, then we have to address the needs.
Great, thank you. And then, so they're written and then they get reviewed, right?
Correct. So an ETR is written every 3 years, and an IEP is written every year. However, we often tell parents that the IEP is not written in stone. So if ever you need to meet, you can call a meeting. And also, a lot of the time, the school staff can also call a meeting if we find that the student is meeting all of the IEP goals. So we can call a meeting to amend the IEP. And a lot of the times, the parents also call to ensure that we either look at other goals or whatever the needs can be. So yes, every year.
Great, thank you.
Number 16, redesign and rename all classes that currently have a disability category designation to reflect the level of supplementary aids and services that will be provided in the class. During the start of the 22-23 school year, the specialized learning classroom titled Intensive Autism and Multiple Disabilities were renamed to Life Skills Classroom. We are continuing to analyze the makeup of our specialized learning classrooms and their need to further inform the descriptions, identified focus, and supports.
Okay.
All right, it's my turn. Good evening, President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, Dr. Clark, Ms. Marshall, and members of the board. Our next and final item that has been completed is item number 17, eliminate practices that preclude some students with disabilities from participating in career technical education courses. So the Special Education Department and Transportation Department have been working to address known areas of need. A lottery system has then such been put in place, which accepts students into career centers. Since a lottery makes the selection, students denied access are not done so based on an existing disability. This will naturally eliminate practices that would preclude students with disabilities. Again, we've also been working with the transportation department to ensure we're supporting students with specific needs that would have outlined in their IEPs to ensure we're providing them that specialized transportation as needed if they attend these career technical institutes.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on that one?
Yes.
So was that identified as a recommendation because that is something that is generally seen, that many districts struggle with, or is it because something they saw specifically that had been one of our practices previously that was putting barriers up for career tech?
Yes, so that wasn't specific to Westerville City Schools. That was more of a general ensuring that these certain technical schools that we send our kids to. This review was done by an organization that's not based in Ohio. So some of the recommendations, as we'll go through this, are more based on national standards and don't necessarily follow some specific laws and regulations in Ohio. So when this recommendation was made, that's when the practice had changed for the lottery. So not just Westerville, but all districts that send their kids, it's based on lottery, not based on if a student has a disability in an IEP.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I just want people to understand it wasn't specific to a practice that we had, but just a general recommendation. So
Yes, and what was more specific to Westerville, and as I mentioned with the transportation department, we've been ensuring we are providing multiple modes and means of more bus stops and more different ways to get our kids to and from these career tech programs.
great. Thank you.
So we are moving on to now items in progress. So we have not completed these items, but we are hoping to have an end date as we are working through them. So the first item in progress is item number 5, determine an appropriate methodology for calculating workloads and caseloads when recommending staffing allocations for licensed service providers. So the special education department is currently working with the assistant superintendent's offices on this project. District administrators, we've recently met with the Westerville Education Association and Ohio Education Association as recently as October 16th and again on October 20th. So we are currently in discussion to review workload and caseload processes with these organizations.
So can you explain the difference between a workload and a caseload?
Yes, so when we're looking at a caseload, that would be what the law states, a certain special education staff member is required to have a maximum on their caseload and legally cannot have any more. So for an example, if I am a 6th grade cross-cat teacher, I can have a caseload of up to 16 students. So legally, I can have no more than 16, as that's how the law is written. Workload is a little bit differently than caseload, as it doesn't just look at numbers that a staff member can max out in. It looks at actual the work of the teacher as it relates to the students they're working with, the types of needs and services they require, as well as the work surrounding that, such as paperwork. So a workload process gets much more in depth than an actual caseload number of a maximum, because it looks at all aspects of the students and the work that goes surrounding the students.
Great, thank you.
Could you said cross-cat. So-
I'm sorry, yeah, so cross-cat would be like cross-categorical, so that would be our students that are served most in the general education setting. They maybe have an IS that would push in like a team-taught classroom setting, or maybe be pulled out for an IEP service period to get that specially designed instruction. So that was what we would consider like a mild to moderate cross-categorical support.
The workload issue is a difficult one. It is extremely difficult, and I really want people to understand the hundreds of layers that are engaged in the workload that we're talking about. It is a great deal of flex and fluidity as we consider different student needs, as we consider different reporting needs, as we consider all of those variances that occur. So it isn't that I have a specific question. I guess it's more that I feel for you. As you work through this, as you work with the associations and trying to identify how best to deal with living in gray, because these workloads aren't necessarily black or white, they very much are living in gray. And that is difficult to categorize and difficult to quantify.
100% correct.
And that makes me just want to ask a question about how cases are allocated, right? So when you're trying to distribute out that caseload among staff, how do you decide who is assigned a case?
Yeah, so again, that's a very, convoluted process where we have students across the district who could be served in their home schools through that mild to moderate cross-categorical support. We also have students that may have more intense needs that would need a specialized learning classroom that may not be in their home school. So this is something we have to review and analyze on a regular basis, where we are looking at every single program within every building across the district to then determine how those caseloads can look, to where we won't have one building where they're sitting at 20% and another building at 100%. But it's a process where it takes us to be looking at a regular basis to then determine how we can best support these teachers and these programs, depending on whether it's the child's homeschool or we have to determine placing a child outside of their homeschool. So this is something that's always ongoing, that we're always examining.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Recommendation number 6 in the Gibson report recommends that we implement a data management system that allows for real-time access and analysis of student data across multiple systems. Over the course of the last school year, the teaching and learning team researched and met with a variety of companies, and we landed on the product Tableau as our data dashboard tool. And if you think about the dashboard on your vehicle, and your dashboard, especially in modern vehicles, gives you a dazzling visual array of the performance of your vehicle and how well it's doing. There's a variety of data points. Well, it's the same thing, except looking at the performance of your engine, or how fast you're going, or how much gas you have left. We are looking at student data, which could vary from the attendance of a student, the grades of a student, the assessments of a student throughout our system, as we look at that to then make decisions about the things and the programs and the resources that we should purchase and implement to support them. So in August of 2023, partner company of Tableau, Plant Moran, they came in and provided intensive training to those who would be actually building and connecting our district's a variety of sources of data into that dashboard, so that we could create a variety of dashboards to answer any question that we may want to have. Over the course of this school year, they will be continuing to learn and train on how to connect our buildings' data to their product so that we can have those dashboards. It is our goal that by the end of this school year, we are ready to roll out some of our preliminarily built dashboards and use them throughout our system as the years progress into a tool that can be used all the way down to the classroom level.
Okay, I always have a question.
All right, that's fine.
So with the dashboards, and obviously this is something that's in progress, right, and building the dashboards out.
Yes.
The intention in building them is around special education, but I'm assuming that there will be dashboards that will include data outside of
Absolutely.
that.
And,
Okay.
and what we have found when we looked at several of the recommendations and including the next couple that I'm going to go over, they're far broader than the narrow scope of students with disabilities, that they actually impact the entire district. This would be one of those.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And so the intent of the dashboard is too that you can look at an individual student, but then also various classes or particular questions that you have, and be able to answer them with the data that's provided from like PowerSchool and
Yes.
Schoology. Okay.
We can use sources like PowerSchool, in our primary and middle school grades, we can look at I-ready assessments, state assessments. We can look at discipline records. We can look at attendance records and combine them into charts and graphs that help us determine which students may be the most at risk. And we can take that from a comprehensive, holistic look all the way down to a singular student. All right. Moving on. The next recommendation number 7, provide campuses with adequate resources and supports to implement multi-tiered systems of support, or what we throw around quite often as MTSS, with fidelity. So what does MTSS mean? Again, it's a multi-tiered system of support. In its most simplistic way, it's a framework for universal instruction and behaviors that can be used to give targeted supports to struggling students. And it's called multi-tiered, and you will typically find MTSS in 3 different tiers. That first tier, tier 1, is instructionally and behaviorally what is universal, which every student has access to. And we hope that all of our students are successful in, but we know some may not be successful within the tier 1 setting, and so you go into what we call tier 2, and you have a smaller amount of students that just needs moderate amount of support in addition to their tier 1 instruction or behavior to be successful. And then the smallest number of students you will find in tier 3, which are the more intensive supports that could be formalized into special education or other holistic behavioral consequences or things like that. So that's what multi-tiered systems of support are when we say MTSS, and the various tiers, that's what they mean. So over the course of last school year, the Teaching and Learning Department worked to build effective and efficient and consistent structures of student supports throughout the district. Every single one of our buildings provides supports to our students. What we were finding is they were all doing it on their own, and there wasn't a consistent Westerville City Schools response to how we help children. And so what we have been building and working and are continuing to work on at the elementary and the secondary level is to provide consistency, which helps our principals be more effective and our staff members more efficient in helping our students. And Westerville City Schools made some investments with this. In 2022-23, Westerville City Schools invested in hiring 4 MTSS multi-tiered systems of support coaches at the elementary level that were hired to support, especially at the tier 2 and tier 3 level, some of our Title I buildings. They supported 4 of our Title I buildings last year. They supported Hawthorne, Huber Ridge, Minerva France, and Point View. And this year they are expanding their reach into more of our elementary schools to provide that support. We also invested in contracting with the ESC of Central Ohio that brought a team out to our teaching and learning team meetings from about the second semester through the end of the year to help us with this heavy lift. We are a large organization, we are a very complex organization, and for them to come in was very helpful for us to then take the baton and continue that work this year. Over the course of this year, the elementary division has a team that they are working with and subcommittees working to look at district data of the kids and how they implement across all of our system, not just our title buildings, the tier 2 and tier 3 supports. We are chronicling our work in what we hope to build an MTSS guidebook, so that paired with secondary and the work that they are doing, that we have a guidebook that is a reference for our teachers, a reference for our parents, a reference for our buildings on how we support your child, what data we look at, and what happens when there is support that's needed. Where do they go? Who supports them? What resources do we use? And we had to start from scratch. We had to start from even using a common language for what we mean for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. How we support it and what do we call it, looking at regular data and being consistent with the data that we look at and analyze to determine what students may need some supports. And of course, our number one focus that is spearheaded by our curriculum and instruction department is our Tier 1, our universal everyday instruction, because we know that the higher quality Tier 1 instruction a student is going to receive, the less support down the road that they may need. And so that's really the work that is ongoing, has been a main focus in the second semester for us last year and this year, and even at the middle school level, we were able to find, as we were opening Minerva Park, we were able to find within that FTE allocation some MTSS support in terms of FTE at each of our 5 middle schools.
So Scott, as you talk about the MTSS structure and the identification and I want to say formalization, but understanding of, shared understanding of what we mean by Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and the supports that we have in place for that. I am looking down the road a ways at a combination between item number 6 and item number 7. So as I look at the database and I look at our MTSS structure, I am seeing down the road, as we get these pieces up and moving, that those two could work together to really give us an excellent three-dimensional look at what's going on with our students and in our classrooms and our buildings. And I see it as having the potential to inform staffing decisions as regards level of staffing that are needed. It's, when we don't work from the same definitions, we don't work from the same understanding of the data, it's easy to miss where some of those staffing needs are becoming ever stronger. So I view 6 and 7 as working together much more closely than we might think at this point.
And you are 100% correct, which is why
that's twice I've been 100% correct.
And that's why we are investing in that dashboard tool to make better decisions to help our kids. All right. When you look at MTSS, most people tend to think of the academic portion, but there's the whole child portion, there's the social emotional needs, there's the behavioral needs of a student. So when you look at recommendation 8, design a system for delivering Tier 2, moderate, Tier 3, more intensive, interventions for behavior at each school level. Another acronym that's thrown around quite a bit is Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support, or we say PBIS quite a bit. And so PBIS plans are one of the things that every school in our state is required to have and required to submit to the Ohio Department of Education. And then it's really a way that how we are able to support our students. At the elementary level, they have a behavior and SEL committee to really dig in to the PBIS fidelity inventory. The secondary buildings have used that PBIS fidelity inventory as well this summer. Well, what is that? The tiered fidelity inventory is a national model for the standards that should be found in effective PBIS plans. So that when you build your PBIS plans, you are looking at data, you are looking at your discipline data, you are looking at the non-academic needs of your students, you are seeing the supports that are needed and that data that should be in there, and it really helps guide you for the types of supports and the folks that should be helping students and their families. It preserves our PBS plans, our Tier 1 behavior portion of our process, and we see those a lot. They're celebrated. We see PAWS, that's P-A-W-S, that's one of our CAT schools. P stands for something, A stands for something, W stands. You see that throughout our elementary schools. You see that throughout our middle schools. You see monikers such as the Warrior Way. Portrait of a Warhawk is something, Cats with Class, all of those things, all of those characteristics that we want our students to be able to exhibit, you will find in those PBIS plans, but also a very standardized and structured way to help students whose behavior isn't where we want it to be at the Tier 1 level. And a lot of times for our students, there's a deeper reason than they're just misbehaving, and we want to be able to surround them, envelope them, and help them and their families in all aspects of that. The secondary team is also doing that, and the team is also looking at the inventory throughout the year and looking at the consistency of what they do across our system, so that actions and supports that are taken in one building are comparable to the actions and supports that are taken in another building across our system. And so that's really the work, the heavy lift, as you said, that is getting a system as large and as complex as ours on one speaking plane about how we help kids.
Can you walk us through, I like to picture things a little bit. So it's one of the hardest things that we have to do, I think, in our system with so many schools, and is trying to create that alignment between schools, right? So can you just walk us through for a minute what that conversation looks like? So you're bringing, principals and team members together across the district, and then just like, tell us how it looks. How did it look this summer when you were working?
Well, I'll tell you, it really is broader than the summer. It's really ongoing.
Yeah.
All of our principals meetings started, some in the summer because we have a little bit more time. I've sat in on some of the secondary principals, for example, and so the principals will get together, and we've had opportunities to bring assistant principals together, and we're looking at some of our infractions that we have, for example. And we say, okay, for this particular infraction, what do you do here? What do you do there? What do you do? And they start to talk and discuss, well, this is how we handle this particular infraction. Well, we handle this one a little bit different. And we start talking through how should we handle it to where that we can find common ground to say, now, there's always, when you're talking about individual behavior, there's always variances from the severity of it to the frequency of it. And all of those things. But to get to a common place of saying, for these actions and infractions, here are how we're going to approach it. Here's how we're going to involve family. Here's how do we need to involve a counselor in this type of infraction? Do we need to involve a social worker or a psychologist? And that's the conversations that they're having at every single principals meeting. They're actually developing a matrix which they are building as we go at the elementary level as well. And, fortunately, the behaviors at the elementary level are a little bit different than the ones that we have at the secondary level, but that's a big start. And the second piece that secondary is working on is the consistency with which we even report our data. And let's say you have some of the more extreme behaviors like fighting, where there's some physical violence involved. Well, you could have one school that enters it as a fight, one school could enter it as an assault, one school could enter it as just a disturbance. And so the reporting to the state, when you look at our discipline data, could be wildly different for the same thing. And so finding that consistency, so even our data that we're looking at is consistent and accurate, is something that we're working on very hard. And I've seen more at the secondary level because the infractions tend to be a little bit, especially when you're talking about those tier 2 and tier 3 behaviors and infractions such as out-of-school suspension and expulsion. The lion's share of those tend to be at the secondary level.
Thank you for walking through that, because I do think it's one of it's something that's really important for us to do. It shouldn't be that a kid who, might have one behavior at one school, if they were at a different school, they would be treated very differently for that. But it's just really hard to drill down that way. So I appreciate they're creating a matrix and understand that every situation is different, but you have to start somewhere and getting everyone on the same page. So I just really want to thank everybody who's doing that, because it's not easy to tease that all out. Yeah, thanks.
And for both Ann Baldwin and Cheryl Relford, that's been one of the focuses that they have carved out time for their principals to have those conversations, because the principals never have those conversations. They live in isolation. They live in their building. They're the mayor of their town. But when they come together, they realize, well, we've got some differences here that we need to reconcile. So kudos to those two for putting that together.
Thanks.
Can I just have a follow-up on that? And I agree, that's a lot to get consistent, and thank you for all that work. I know there's also some really good things that are happening in some of those buildings, and and I'm assuming that that's also being shared amongst the other principals, and how we handle, a fight or something, and some skills that are taught to children to be able to work things out. So as they learn and grow through the years, that they're able to address those things that they might see later in life as well.
And our buildings do, like I said at the beginning, you see a lot of acronyms at the elementary and middle level, and more character phrases, some like the Warrior Way, are deeply, deeply entrenched in those buildings. We celebrate the kids that are doing the things that we want them to do as well, from Renaissance programs to different celebrations that we have. But we also want to do so in a way that's mindful that we're not alienating the students and creating a bigger rift between others. And so we have, led by Tammy Santa and her team, I mean, just, I don't know that any district around has a better team to help our principals with that. And so it's really a unified effort from our department. All right, the ninth recommendation, implement a two-pronged diversity and cultural awareness training program and classroom management strategies for all teachers and campus administrators. And really, this was work that I think began long before Gibson ever showed up. We were one of the first districts around to invest in diversity and inclusion from a human resource investment. As a function of our board-approved administrative and organized changes, we have taken our educational equity department and moved that within the student services department. One of the things that we have been doing in the last couple of years is all of our new staff members, and we have continued to do that through our new staff orientations every summer, is we go through training modules that is provided by the Ohio State University's Kerwin Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, and it's the Be the Change modules, which highlights maybe some implicit biases that you may have that you don't even realize that you have. And so it really kind of helps also put the step forward that diversity and equity and inclusion is very, very important with us. There's some other investments that our district has made in this without just having a director of educational equity. We have invested in equity facilitators in every building. And the equity facilitators help partner with the principals and their staff to forward programs, activities, trainings for their staff to make sure that all of our students feel welcome, feel safe, feel included in our buildings, and feel like truly our moniker, where you belong, that this is where they belong and that they're seen and that they are heard. Buildings have developed over the last couple of years equity goals that have partnered with their academic goals, and they develop them in smart languages, and they have strategies and measures and things that they want to look at, and it could range from not just we want to take a look at maybe some inequities with our discipline, but it is how are we providing an opportunity for the kids here to have what Jim McCann would always say, that spotlight. How can we make sure that the spotlight gets placed on this section of child? And we think of equity in a way, a lot of times our mind tends to go to race, but equity is so far broader than that, from religion to ethnicity to disability status to all kind of preferences and choices that students make that may make them outside of the mainstream. We want all of our students to know you are young humans who we are going to embrace and love, and make sure that you have a place where you can be successful. And so that's the work that we continue to do, that Gibson highlighted, that we have a department that's devoted to making sure those experiences are there for our kids.
We have, the recommendation was to implement a two-pronged diversity awareness, cultural awareness program.
Mm-hmm.
What, can you share real quick, what are the two prongs?
Well, when you look at the recommendation, the two-prong diversity and cultural awareness program, which we've been very, very heavy on, in classroom management strategies. We provide classroom management strategies. We do that through formal and informal training. It could be formal, such as sessions that we put together, or guest speakers that we bring together on We Day. We have trainings that principals and professional development that we're providing. We're also continuing to look at that. Just recently, and we've had our first meeting, we put together a discipline committee to take a look at our discipline data, to take a look at our policies and processes, and the way that we manage and work with our students. And a part of that could be, some of our data could be telling us, which we'll see in real time down the road in our data dashboard, that maybe there's some additional professional development that we need to employ with our staff. So it's not only cultural training and awareness, but making sure that all of our staff members are equipped to be successful with all the students that they have in their building.
And I think it's also important for us to know each building has developed their own SMART goals
Yes.
as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes, and this is probably our third year at least doing that. Mhm.
Can you share with us, real quick, follow-up to those goals? What kinds of procedures are in place to monitor the progress of those goals actually being accomplished?
Yeah, well, our initial coordinator for equity in educational equity, Cynthia DeVise, now Anitra Simmons, they actually give those not only to their supervisor and Cheryl, but they also give those to Anitra, and Anitra and her team review those, and she helps them, and she sits down with them. Cynthia did that, Anitra does that now, to sit down with them and talk about what are the things that you are trying to impact here in your building, and what does that equity goal look like here, and we monitor that over the course of the year. Anitra and her department does that, but it's shared among what is happening with our teaching and learning team that meets a couple of times a month, and we look at all of those things as well. We look at the data that they want to impact and see over the course, how are they measuring their progress. I'll give you one for example. There were certain subsets, not easy to say, of students at Westerville North High School that academically, that I know that the principal and the admin team and the staff there really wanted to target, who typically have been the least successful academically in their building, and they put goals and strategies in place, met with Anitra, met with Ann, and really measured the strategies that they were doing to see if there was an impact academically for their students. And that's not an overnight thing, but that is a culture that they are trying to build there. That's one that I can think of off the top of my head. But others, strengthening programs and opportunities for kids to express themselves. When you look at some of our high school football and basketball games, we have dance teams that all students feel connected to and part of that perform. We have performance, I think, at Westerville South, I forget the name of it, but we just had a performance of a very profound work of literature in a very small setting, maybe about a month ago, and the name of what the students there did escapes me, but it was very, very powerful. So opening and providing and being intentional about providing opportunities like that for all of our students, I think, has been the biggest impact that we've had through that department.
And I think it's also important to note that there are budgetary dollars that follow these initiatives as well, so each school, each learning community can accomplish these goals.
Absolutely. And we've supported them curricularly as well. I mean, we have classes that we have built that our students have wanted to take, race and ethnic studies, African American studies paired with African American lit. So we have made an investment to say this isn't just lip service for us. We mean it, and we're going to invest our dollars, our time, and our resources in it.
All right, we are now moving on to ongoing items. We call these ongoing because really the work doesn't end. This is projects and different items that we will continue the work and don't have a projected end date. So with that being said, item number 1, which is really their first recommendation, it's really all-encompassing of everything that we're reviewing tonight, and it's develop a multi-year plan for sustained improvement for students with disabilities. And so the Special Education Department continues to support designing this multi-year professional plan. This work started actually last year, and we're going into year 2, and that's everything we're presenting to you tonight, what we've accomplished, what we're currently working on, and what our goals for the near future are. But just so you guys are aware of what does this multi-plan look for in this department, different items that we are focusing on for the sustained improvement of students with disabilities include professional development, curriculum resources, a workload caseload process, parent engagement opportunities, diving into our continuum of services, and maintaining special education compliance.
Just a second. Can you explain a little further in the update? As you said, provided 4 training sessions to all administrators and one's coming up in November. Can you provide a little more information on, and this kind of goes back to, Gertie, some of the things you were talking about earlier, what additionally are we expecting our administrators to do that they have not done in the past?
So, attending special education meetings, which we would call IEP meetings, ETR meetings. This year, they may be sitting in more meetings without a special education coordinator. Oftentimes in the past, special education coordinators were able to sit in more of these meetings alongside building administrators. So this year, we wanted to ensure if they were going to be covering more of these special education meetings when coordinators were not available, that's where the training really focuses in on, that compliance piece, the understanding the IEP, what to look for when they're sitting in these meetings, how to respond to certain questions from parents if they don't have this special education coordinator. So that's where the training has really focused on since this summer, and we'll be going into our 5th training on the November WE Day, is really just supporting our building principals, who are the ones that are on the ground, the ones that are sitting in these meetings, or oftentimes the first contact with parents, to be able to give them the tools that we maybe haven't had the opportunities to give such in-depth trainings in the past.
Okay, so if the building administrators are attending, sitting in on, and in many ways leading more IEP, ETR meetings and so forth, is that a function of being understaffed, or is it a function of a change in our model, or both?
Both.
Yeah, it's kind of what I thought.
For those that might not know, we do have a parent advocate. Can you talk a little bit how that parent advocate might help support a parent understand, like, what that's just starting this process?
Yeah, so Stephanie Thomas is our parent mentor. She's funded through a grant, so she's not technically employed by Westerville City Schools, but she does act as our parent mentor, which is a little bit different than an advocate. A parent advocate would be typically someone hired by the family to advocate for their child, while Stephanie Thomas's role is to really educate parents and be that liaison so they can better understand the special education process. Her information is on our district's website. She does also attend our parent engagement forums, and we'll be working with our, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but our Special Education Parent Advisory Council. But she's certainly a resource to our families.
Thanks. Words do matter. I was going to ask you to talk about that, so I'm glad you're going to.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Could I ask, before we move on real quick, just ask a question? A lot of this, unless you have a student that has been identified and designated as needing the assistance of special education, we have no idea what this world looks like and all that goes into it. Could you just briefly explain to us real quick, what does an IEP meeting, what does that look like? What's going on in this meeting, and who's in the room?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as Ms. Glass indicated, that individualized education plan for students that the team has met through that evaluation team report, that multi-factored evaluation, to determine that student has a disability and requires specially designed instruction. So once that is determined, the plan is written, that IEP, and it's individualized. So that's the key word here. So it's based on the student's individual needs that the IEP team comes together as an intervention specialist proposes the IEP to then talk through the team. Because it's individualized, it could look very different. There's a continuum of services, but when we're sitting in these meetings, the IEP team would include the parent, an intervention specialist, general education teachers, and a district rep, which could either be a building administrator or like a special education coordinator. So those would be the core team members, but also, depending on the student and their needs, they may have speech needs or occupational therapy needs. So we could have different related service members sitting around that table as well.
Okay, thank you.
Ongoing item number 12. Train staff to develop behavior goals for any behavior that impedes a student's learning. If goals are not mastered after a reasonable amount of time, amended IEP to include a behavior intervention plan based on a functional behavior assessment. So the district is providing ongoing training to staff regarding behavior improvement plans and functional behavior assessments. In August, we provide professional development on managing behavior through learning on how to create and implement informal behavior plans, as well as ongoing when and how to complete a functional behavior assessment for behavior plans. Additional information regarding functional behavior assessment, behavior intervention plan is shared at monthly education department meetings for ongoing learning opportunities for our staff.
I really like that one. I really do. When we look at teaching and implementing best practices regarding student behavior, one of the things that I hear over and over and over again from our teachers is that they need additional help and they need additional training around student behavior. And I look at this as a Tier 1,
Yes.
Tier 2, Tier 3 issue with a heavy focus, as we were talking earlier, on Tier 1 so that we can maintain Tier 1 status for a lot of our kids. I also see a connection between this and what we were talking about earlier as regards a significant meshing of a number of the components that we're working on here to give us a much clearer picture of the student, the classroom, the building, and the district overall. So, yeah, I like this one.
Yes. As a matter of fact, during the day in August, we had a couple of classes that one of our behavior specialists put together. The room was so small at Central that we had to go to the auditorium, and it was mostly attended by general education teachers, which was wonderful because they understand that they also need to be part of the solving of children with some behavior concerns. So it was really great to see as well.
And just a question about how that, or whether or not we've seen a change in those needs, right? COVID, and we talk about what are the impacts of all that. So when you think of what used to be necessary, like in terms of sort of a Tier 1 with the behavioral piece, like, have we seen a big change? Are we hearing anecdotally from classroom teachers that, gosh, I need new strategies now, right, for at my Tier 1 than I did before?
Yes, we are. We are definitely seeing an increase in behaviors. And part of the reason that we are seeing that, it's when you think about these babies that are sitting in our class right now during COVID, they did not have access to people, right? Even when they were communicating with others, often they were masked and they were not really attending school full time. So again, you just take a pause and try to understand where their needs are and try to meet them where they need to be met. So again, it's continuing to just understand what they are doing and continue to understand how to best support them. And I think our staff is willing and ready to accept more training because they see that they also need help. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate all those general education teachers being interested in this because, and it does help for me to think of it in terms of tiers, right? Correct. What used to be, what maybe we thought of as a Tier 2 in terms of the behavior issue, it might just be Tier 1 now, and we need it everywhere.
We are feeling it, that's for sure.
Yeah, yes, yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Number 13, examine Section 504, case management responsibility at the secondary level. So Elizabeth Jackin over here, just in addition to the civil rights coordinator that she used to occupy for the past years, she also assumed the role of Title IX compliance coordinator for the district. So in addition to her new role, she will conduct an internal 504 audit of each building to determine current practices regarding the monitoring and implementation of 504 plans. She also is going to conduct research around surrounding districts to inform her report. In early spring, she is going to sit together with upper administration so she could inform her findings of what we would like for her to see for our district. Item number 14, encourage and support the routine development of unit and lesson plans to support improve instructional practices and higher student achievement levels. So Westerville City Schools continue to encourage teachers to submit to their administrators unit and lesson plans. The Special Education Department created walkthroughs from across multiple learning environments in order for building administrators to use the guidance document on best practices to support the training throughout our special education classrooms.
Leaders, you talked about the leaders observing during rounds and walkthroughs, and I do really like the instructional rounds and the walkthroughs. They're great and they're wonderful energizers, information, wealth. It's really good stuff. Who are the leaders who go on these?
So this is multi-tiers, right? So for elementary, I know that, for example, Cheryl and Kate select couple principals, like, and couple teachers and couple instructional coaches, and they go to all of those walkthroughs together. For example, they will say that we are going to visit 3 buildings, for example. So it depends on who's in her rotation, and so they do that for at the elementary level. And also for the secondary, it's also the same thing. Ann Baldwin, along with Jennifer Knapp, and also a couple of the CI curriculum and instruction teachers, right? So they all get together and they also invite teachers in different buildings. So let's say that they are going to visit South. So for example, they will say North and also Central teachers will go and visit to ensure that, they are seeing different things so they can see how do we make our things better. So they invite all of us. So it depends on how busy we are. If we are not, let's say I'm busy, sometimes I'll say, hey, Lindy Whitson, would you please go? And to ensure that we all are seeing the same thing, and it's not a judgmental thing, it is just what did we see, and they have questions that they have to answer, and they do not put teacher's name on the information. It is just a learning for all of us to make sure that all of our students are being exposed to great instruction. And as far as the walkthrough documents that we have created, Special ed is my world. I've been in it for 23 years. I understand it. I live this world. Special ed is also his world. However, when we have general education teachers who become principals, there's a lot that they do not know. So in order for us to support them, we designed those walkthroughs for all of our specialized learning classrooms. So for example, in an ED classroom, you will see certain things that are acceptable that you would not find acceptable in, let's say, a classroom with intellectual disabilities, right? So with that is when the principal walk into your classroom versus this classroom, what should they expect? What should the language be like when they are instructing the students? What are the behaviors that are kind of like acceptable and some of them that are not? So it is just a matter of ensuring that when they walk into a classroom, the principals are aware of what to look for in order for them, again, to just give gentle feedback to make sure that all of our students are able to learn and all of our students are just making progress throughout the day.
I like that. I like the way you've structured both of those. It's very well done, and I very much appreciate the inclusion of the teachers on the rounds. That is how we make a great deal of change happen, and that's how we cement a lot of things that don't need to be changed. So nice job with both of those structures.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to item number 15. Reconstitute the Team Teach instructional model to focus on the core content areas of ELA and math and support campuses and teacher teams and the implementation fidelity. So the district is implementing a scaffolded timeline to phase out team-taught science and social studies in the high school, beginning with the current 8th grade class, which will be the incoming class for the 24-25 school year. The outcome of this shift will allow for increased sections of English and math team-taught at the high school level. Additionally, this will reduce the number of students sitting in these current sections that are identified for special education services. So during this school year, the 23-24 school year, there will be additional training that will be provided to staff. This will address the shift in resources and how to differently support and train the general education teachers as a result of this shift. Item number 18, develop a comprehensive professional learning plan based on disaggregated student data and align resources and guide the ongoing professional learning for all educators in the district. So again, the special education department continues to meet with our instructional program teachers to focus on utilizing curriculum resources and addressing student deficits through those resources. After the first professional development day, this team sought and analyzed feedback from staff regarding sessions, which has helped inform future PD for November, with a focus on utilizing curriculum resources and addressing student deficits. And as we come to a close, item number 19, which is the last and final recommendation, expand parent engagement programs to sustain local participation in Westerville City Schools special education program. So recently, our special education department has sent out communication to families with students with disabilities to gain input and suggestions to further inform parent engagement events. So we're analyzing this feedback. We've gotten well over hundreds of responses to guide the future parent engagement forums that we're going to be holding this school year. So this information was gathered from preschool, elementary, and secondary families. We actually had the first parent engagement forum, which was just held last week on October 17th. We had a great turnout. We talked about Special Education 101. In that meeting, we also asked for volunteers to sign up for something that is going to be newly implemented this school year, which is the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, where we have been working with a Westerville parent, Linda Freeman Walker, who has gladly accepted this as to something that she's going to support us with and act as a parent liaison. So alongside of the special education parent engagement forums, where we'll be providing training sessions and information sessions to parents, and then also following up with recorded sessions to put on our website and YouTube channel, we're going to also be offering a more intimate experience for parents to come together on a regular basis with Ms. Freeman Walker to talk through current events or challenges that they're facing so we can hear what's going on in the community and respond to appropriately.
I just want to say I love that. Thank you.
Can I actually jump back on number 15 and just ask a question? So in phasing out, hold on, that's 14. I need my readers, you guys. It's like a new thing sort of for me, so I gotta do this. So the phase out of science and social studies team talk, can you tell us how that looks now? And then where you're trying to get with that, right? I mean, I understand all the words here, but again, what does that look like?
Yeah, so currently in high school, there are sections of science and social studies that are considered team taught. So we'll have a general education teacher and an intervention specialist teaching that content. This recommendation is stating, and research has also shown, that you get more bang for your buck when you put more of your resources in the core content areas of reading, writing, and math. So based on that research, the Gibson review recommended that that's the model we go with. Currently, that is the model we have for team taught science and social studies only in high school. We have eliminated that in middle school to offer more team taught sections in the middle school setting. So with this scaffolded model, we're not going to be taking anything away. This will be the first class going into ninth grade next year. And so with that, we would hope to increase more sections of team taught ELA and math to reduce the ratio in order for our students in special education to get more of that individualized support by offering more sections and reducing the ratio.
Okay, thank you.
How do the social studies and science teachers feel about that? What's the impact they believe they're going to see?
So that's something that we are working on this year, where we are going to create opportunities to offer professional development for that class of teachers, so we can work with them on universal design for learning, how to support and use accommodations in those classrooms if historically they've had team-taught intervention specialists. I would like to also even reach out because, again, our middle school model is different, so finding some stellar 7th, 8th grade gen ed teachers who have been able to meet the students' needs in special education without being in a team-taught setting, and utilizing them to also help provide this support for our high school teachers, that will see an impact.
Thanks.
So I'm wondering, when you have these team-taught classes, did we put more kids that have more needs together in those classes? And that way, you know where I'm going. So then you would have someone come in and support, but they wouldn't really be able to meet all of the needs because they were heavy in order to try to meet those needs. Is that making sense?
That makes sense, and that is correct.
100% correct.
No, you get 100%
So I was trying to
correct
figure out a
there.
way to point that out.
Yes,
So
so not only do we have a high amount of students on IEP sitting in some of our classrooms, we also have students on 504 plans, we also have students as English learners, and we also have students that just may need more Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. So when you take all of that together, that's making these classes quite challenging to meet the unique needs of all learners.
Right, yes. How many special education students do we have in our district? If you know, if you don't, it's okay. Guesstimate, or
I would say a little over 2,000.
out of the 14,500 kids?
Correct.
Okay, and those are just ones that have been identified to have an IEP and a 504. We're not counting our English language learners in there and any of our tiered support students.
And also the 504, that a little over 2,000, 15% is just students on IEPs.
Yeah, so that's high. That's a lot of, and then it's across the spectrum, right? It's not, I mean, I think when we sit here as a parent, unless you have a special education student, you don't realize the spectrum of needs. So we talked about some of the, we renamed a class, it's life skills now.
Yes.
I don't think we realize as community members and parents, unless you have a child, like really what those needs truly are, which then goes back to the caseload workload thing, where we're putting just a number in there, and we're probably, I think everyone is has good intentions and wants to meet those needs, but at some point we can't really meet those needs with the high numbers. Would be one.
Can I say 100% correct again?
Yeah.
100% correct. 2 times.
So, yay.
That is correct.
I am just trying to point a couple of things out because, again, it's high level up here that I don't think a lot of us understand unless you're in there and you can really experience it. Is there anything else you would like to tell us that we haven't asked you that would be beneficial for us to know?
As a matter of fact, I know a couple of years ago, I think it was Mr. Vaughn, Mr. Bell, and also you, and I think it was even Mr. Velardo when he was here, that you guys did take a tour with us and go see the life skills class.
Yep.
Honestly, I would also encourage you guys, if you guys would like to see that, and I know Dr. Clark has not seen any of all of these classes, if you guys would like, we would love to take you around just so we could see, just to what you were saying, the intensity of the behaviors we have in these classrooms and also the different needs. So I think it will help people to better understand when we talk about workload and caseload, just so you could see what the teachers are going through. So if you guys would like, I know Ms. Marshall also went, if you guys would like, we'll gladly set these meetings up for you guys so you guys can go and visit our classrooms. And I think the staff would also appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I would love to. Maybe I can go to Kroger with them. I know they do some shopping.
Yes,
trips
they
and-
do, yes. Yeah, so we'd love that.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I do. And I think that this is something that Tracy was referring to, and you heard it coming from me as well. I appreciate all of the extraordinarily hard work that you're doing on this. But there are a couple of red flags that I see. One is as we place more responsibility on the building level, our administrators and our classroom teachers, we cannot ever and you know this really well, we cannot ever assume that that is the substitute for appropriate staffing levels. And my concern for special ed, especially it has grown significantly over the past few years, is that some of our best intentions sometimes end up not doing what we hoped because we simply don't have the staffing to make it happen. I don't want to see that happen with the hard work that's going on here. That doesn't mean I'm promising that as we go through the next budget cycle, there's going to just be, you know, a windfall as regards staffing, but it is something we have to keep in mind all the time. The other red flag is, as much as I like much of what I'm hearing and seeing in here, it's really easy to let the pendulum swing too far. And when that happens with some of the systematizing that we're doing here, we have to avoid a pendulum that swings too far and creates rigidity rather than a facilitated consistency, if you will. It's, it's just one of those things we have to caution ourselves all the time on not substituting rigidity for growth and practice. And I know you know it. I know that's not your mindset, but I also know how in big systems it can happen. But this is very good work, and you've done a heck of a lot to move us from where we started with the Gibson Review to where we are now, and I thank all of you for the work.
In closing, I'll echo that. The reason that multinational companies all the way to school districts do audits is to find ways to be more impactful. And you put the nail on the head when the hammer on the head, the nail on the
nail.
That you did that when you said, I mean, if you think of our 19 recommendations, 7 of them are complete. And several of them are ongoing to completion, and that's because of this group right here. I have watched them every day expend every ounce of energy that they've had, and these two right here who've devoted their whole professional souls to helping our kids, and you couldn't get a better group than this one right here, who believes in what they do. They love our children, they love our staff, and so I am so grateful that this group right here makes up my team.
Anything else? Thank you. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. Thank all of you. 13.1, may I have a motion to approve a resolution to reinstate Robert's Rules of Order.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. And that takes us to board comments. Does anyone have comments?
I do.
Okay.
That's right. I just want to first congratulate everybody through making through the first quarter. Congratulations. I just have a short legislative update. There's a ton of things that are out there that they're introducing that you question why they're introducing, because, well, at any rate, but just to follow up on something I brought up at the last board meeting, and the House passed House Bill 187, which is sponsored by Representatives Thomas Hall. He's a Republican from Madison Township, and Adam Byrd, who is a Republican from New Richmond, by a 58 to 26 vote. And just to remind everybody, this was, so some background, what's in place or was in place is to ensure that real property is valued at its fair market value. County auditors reappraise or update the value of all property every 3 years. I'm sure Ms. Marshall will correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. Once every 6 years, each county undergoes a sexennial appraisal in which the county auditor reappraises all property based on examination of each parcel. And at the midpoint of the 6-year reappraisal cycle, auditors review and adjust these values to reflect market conditions since the reappraisal. So this reassessment phase is known as the triennial update. During the triennial update, in lieu of examining each parcel, auditors make valuation adjustments on a statistical basis using the overall percentage change in the aggregate value of each class of property. So with this new bill, if it's passed, and it's passed the House, beginning with 2024 tax year, the bill removes tax authority to order adjustments to property tax values. Instead, under the bill, they would continue to review county auditors' valuations, but instead of mandating a correction, they could only issue recommendations regarding an increase or decrease in values, and the county auditor may make further adjustments based upon a recommendation, but is not really required to do so. And the bill also reverses the appeal process. So instead of a county auditor appealing the taxes correction order, they may appeal an auditor's decision not to accept its recommendations, and the appeal would still be taken to the bill. Oh, I don't know. I'm going to use an acronym after I said don't use acronyms. The BTA.
Board of Tax Revision.
Thank you.
Board of Tax Appeals, sorry.
Okay, which could order modifications if it finds the auditor's valuations to be unreasonable or unlawful. And since the tax may no longer require the auditor to make corrections, the bill also removes the provision that requires tax to withhold 50% of local government fund distributions to that county, and also strikes instructing the Department of Education to withhold 50% of state revenue distributions to school districts in that county. I'll save the rest for another time. The last thing I'll just mention is the Westerville Education Foundation is kicking off the Westerville Student Education Association this week. It kind of went defunct, and we're really excited about bringing this back. We held our first meeting today at Central, and really appreciate the principals at all of the high schools and the staff that have really been supportive in bringing this back. So that's it. Thank you. More to come.
Anybody else? Jen?
No, we said it before, but I know that this team has put in a lot of work, and there are lots of other people too who are working hard on this. So I want to thank those of you in the room and thank everyone who's not in the room who's working hard on special ed and all the pieces that it touches, which is really, everything in the end. But starting with that and working out from there, I want to thank you with that. And then just thanks everybody for doing the suspending Robert's rules and doing this in this format. I really appreciated that. I hope that it felt, it's a little easier for us to ask questions and just have a little bit of back and forth. So thanks for I don't know, not being exactly guinea pigs on this, but it's a format that we haven't used a lot, and I really appreciate you doing that.
So I want to echo Jen's comments, and I also would like to remind everyone to please get out and vote. If anyone's watching this, we have an election coming up, and we have 2 board seats up. Unfortunately, we're going to lose Mr. Bell, and we have 3 people running, so please do your homework, please, 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 and that's it for me. 15.1, the board will meet in regular session on Monday, November 27th, 2023 at 6 p.m. here at the Early Learning Center. And may I have a motion to enter executive session for purposes of discussing employment and compensation of a public employee.
So moved.
Second?
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor-Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
7:44.
We are back from executive session, and I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. And with that, we're adjourned.
8:48.